I think the range of work in this year's shortlist is fantastic, and you don't envy the judges, do you? Because they've got to decide, and it is a bit like deciding whether a trombone is better than a grapefruit, isn't it? Because they're very different kinds of things. Our next poet, Rachael Boast, has written a wonderful book called Void Studies. It is a remarkable collection of poems that approach, as she says, the abstract quality of music. It's to do with a project of Rambo's, where he wanted to write in the spirit of musical etudes and would go beyond the temptation to convey any direct message. And I love that phrase. Not resist temptation, but go beyond it. Go beyond the temptation to have any direct message. So what is at the other side of that temptation? And that's what Rachael is giving us in here. Wonderful, short poems that actually ripple like a pond. Lines like, the field deepens towards a far line. Notes on the tongue with the right measure of air. A lake can hold only so much rainwater. And you think, yes, that's what these poems are. A lake that holds rainwater so much, and then it spills. And the water spills out the lake, and somewhere in that spilling is where the poems are. Rachael Boast.
Well, in the light of certain events of 2016, I started thinking about narcissism and what the opposite of narcissism might be. And I came to the conclusion it was perhaps something like empathy, and then that poetry, more often than not, is an act of empathy. So many poems have a sense of the other in them in some way. I hope you'll detect a note of that empathizing in the poems I'm going to read for you. I won't say much about the poems, partly because I'm still trying to figure them out myself. I'll read mostly from Void Studies, and I'll finish with one poem that's in a small section at the back of the book called Poems of the Lost Poem. Afterlife. Late nights like unsent letters, the fold coming unstuck from this one in the moist air, the message made prescient by the way in which a wave, lifting from the surface of itself, could be lifted further enough to reach into it and grasp from under its erratic stars the unwritten hour before dawn. Snow. As though it had waited all year in the wings of a sleep-eyed white angel to fall, and did so in an hour, assured of its own answerless light cast across the garden, while ice crystals melt from the bright lettering upheld in the trees overnight. Everything is lost to the river's deep lay and to the low notes sustained in its shadows. The roads give and take nothing, and you can't get home, although you're home. Secret alphabets. After an hour, it was clear there was nothing to say we didn't both already know, that couldn't be said better in the act of lifting a fork of fish eggs to my mouth, which is how we continued the exchange. A piece of bread torn in two in return for your sea bass, a sip of Curve Paradis for my Chateau Néant, invisible fruit softening on your tongue, becoming the unwritten notes of a dark song. Shattered. A lake can only hold so much rainwater, then overflows its mirror, breaking up into details of the picture, impossible to gather again the original image we glimpsed, now lost in this drop of what is cupped in your hands. Airtime. Breaking my fast with earth and stones, or worse, eating the masonry of old churches, the boulders of floods. You reminded me of my new copy of Etude Néant I killed a fly with 22 years ago. How the nail in the wooden beam entered through the back cover, the index, the last poems, and pierced them. Here I am, up in the air, leaving your studious island where everything turns like a page, heads, phrases, street corners, the statue of Galileo, moods of suspense and elevation, and after the taste of violets, nothing. Night vision. Back you go to the late hours' work of the sound of the night against where you live your life within a whereabouts unknown. But now, her dance like no other includes you, knew you all along for how you keep time, the elegance of the way you move slowly across the room, then gathering the dark, then brave in the doorway of her arms. Reverdi. Climbing over the gate into a garden for residents only, or so it says, being the perfect place to notice a green thought gaining ground from underneath the dreams I bring with me, which seem to have more reality than can be accounted for. I hold the key to this privacy, to pursue once again the magical study of the happiness nothing escapes. And finally, a poem called Special Reserve. This is in the last section of the book, which is not really void studies, but it does carry on the idiom that seems to have been happening, just adding an extra 4 lines. Special Reserve. When you leave, you never quite leave, keeping me at the edge of your vision as the days fill with other people whose voices now and then rise above the radio you seldom switch off, for how it drowns in sonatas the events of a day and cleanses them even when asleep, or when, if ever, you think back to what happened before, and find me again with not much to say, sitting on the bank of the river with you, speaking in soft voices of the commonplace, for the heart must surely speak that way. Thank you.